please say a little bit about yourself.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Mat Ricardo. I am a variety performer. For, I guess, the first couple of decades of my career, I was a street performer. Still dip the toe in as often as I can. What I learned there, I took into cabaret and theatre. So I do a lot of cabaret work. I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on my 5th one-man show, which actually would have opened today at the Edinburgh Fringe. My 5th one-man show, The Extraordinary Gentleman, would have opened at 12:30 today, but some stuff happened, so I'm not in Scotland. And I also write, and I do other sorts of making and creating of stuff. But essentially, my wife would say that I do shtick. You know, shtick, jokes and tricks. And you know, when I'm not being interviewed at home, I usually am known for wearing nice suits. But it's too hot for that tonight.
You're a gentleman, yes?
I'm a gentleman. Yeah, you know, on a good day.
And so, why do this? Why begin this life?
I mean, that's a big question to start with.
It is a big question. Well, why begin? Probably the better one to start with. Then.
Because there's a lot of answers that I can give now, but those answers are from the knowledge of having spent a life. I was a teenager and I was on holiday with my parents, and I saw a street performer, and I had never considered being a performer, really. My parents did a little bit of Amdram, but you know, it had never really appealed to me. I saw this street performer whose name was Ricardo, and I just immediately loved what that magic trick he was playing of going to a place not designed for a show, and just by sheer force of will and skill and craft and talent making it into a theater. Because you know, it's what street performers do. They turn a place into a theater just by saying, no, I decide it's a theater now because I say so. It's beautiful. And I watched him every day. It was a folk festival in Yorkshire, and I watched him. I was in the front row of his crowd every day for a week. And then by the second week, a little switch in my head flicked, and I realized I didn't want to be his biggest fan. I wanted to be him, you know. And I don't know why. It was just like, this is what he's doing I've never seen before. It's really special. There's something he's doing that I've never seen anybody do, because you can't see that on television or in a theater.
What did you think of him as a human being at the time?
I thought he was charismatic. He was funny. He was good looking in a very beaten up kind of way. And he was this will key into you. He was clearly a rogue. You know, he had that glint in his eye of appearing just 12% little bit dodgy. You know, just that thing that buskers have that you wouldn't have if you were doing that same show, but you've been brought up doing it in cabaret or in theatres. You wouldn't have that thing that street performers have, or a lot of them have, where they look like they can probably find someone who can get whatever you want, and they know how to throw a punch. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. Yeah.
So yeah, I was a little bit scared of him. A little bit intimidated because he was different and weird. He was weird because street performers are weird. But yeah, long story short, by the time I got back home after the holiday, there was a pet shop on the end of our street, and I went there and bought 3 rubber dog balls, and I got a book from the library about how to juggle, and that was it. There's no going back.
And so when you got the book and learned how to juggle, did you sit at home and just start practicing? Did you look for other jugglers?
No, I was very shy. I was one of those loner kids. Like before I got into juggling, I was massively into computers and hacking and coding and stuff, all stuff that is solitary. I was always happy, and still really am happiest just locking myself away and making something or doing something or learning something. That's my safe place. And my parents were not always the most fun people to be around. I'm an only child, and my dad had some mental health issues, and sometimes I got the brunt of it. So being in my room was as safe a space as a child can have, So no, I just got a book, and I just secretly, just in my room with these 3 balls over my bed, just learned, and started going to the library. My parents were librarians. I love libraries. It's so going to the library, finding books on circus and stuff, and just starting to get a sense of what this world was.
Yeah. And so what was looking at books of circus like then? What was that experience of the world? What did you see the world as being when you looked at these books?
It was weird because all the books about circus, there was like a boom in sort of what they call new circus, which brought with it things like, Soleil and Chaos and stuff in the kind of late 80s. This was just before that boom. So circus, like variety at the time, was of the past. There wasn't any of it now, I mean, back then there was the Paul Daniels show.
I should really ask what year are we in now?
We are in the mid-80s.
Okay.
Sort of
84 maybe?
86, about 86, 87. No, 86, yeah.
So it really is just before the boom.
Yeah, that was sort of 88, was suddenly, So the books were great, and I got a lovely sense of history, which I still is meaningful to me. But at the same time, it's like, well, you're learning an art form that hasn't been popular for like 50 years. What are you going to do with this skill? Nothing, So that was kind of weird. But I'm still one of the, I'm a kind of nerd for that stuff. I love researching stuff. A lot of my theatre shows have had a large element of talking about things that happened in the past, and this is sort of zipping forward a bit, but as you carve out a career in this art form, you realize that your role is to be one point of a timeline, to take arts that have perhaps fallen out of favor a bit, to make them your own, and then to pass them on to the next person in the future. That is your role, But yeah, I enjoyed reading about all these great jugglers and weird circus stories, and I think that's when I started reading about people like W.C. Fields. But it did all seem a long way away.
Yeah, well, you said it was a long way away. Did it seem at the time as if it was something you could achieve? I get the feeling that it seemed like it wasn't. You were doing it for the sake of it, kind of thing.
Think, yeah, you're right. I think, like a lot of things that I was doing then, it was, and a lot of things that teenagers and kids do, it's an escape from the rest of your life, which is designed for you by your parents and by school, and it's a thing you have control over. It's I like this, and I'm going to decide to learn about it and to get good at it, and then it'll be mine. It's my thing, So I think there was an element of that. But I know the 2 moments when I realized it could be something was the Paul Daniels Magic Show on a Saturday night, BBC One, watching. I used to watch it every week, and they'd have jugglers on. They'd have people like Chris Cremo and Natalie Unterlin and Rob Murray, who are all, those 3 people are my heroes, and I'm lucky to have hung out with the 2 ones that aren't dead. And I saw these jugglers and went, well, there's this man I've never seen before called Chris Cremo. He's doing cigar boxes. I know what that is. That's juggling. That's in my books. He's doing it on television. So it must be a job. If he can do it, other people can do it. I don't know anything about him. I don't know where he's from, where he works, but I know that is his job. So therefore, it can be my job too. So there was that. And then the second thing was, this would have been a couple of years later, maybe a year and a half later. And if there's any jugglers or street performers of my generation watching, they will get a frisson of nostalgia when I say the words Colombo Street Sports Centre, which was on a Sunday afternoon. There was this sports centre in South London that all the jugglers in London went to. all the jugglers in London went there. Hobby jugglers, old jugglers who used to work in music hall, street performers, they all went there. And they all just juggled and they hang out. And
what was the place like?
It was a big sport hall. It was you'd walk in, you'd pay like whatever it was, a quid or something. I think it was 40p. I think it was 40p. That's just coming to my head. You'd walk in, you'd go down, you turn right down a corridor, and it was a sports centre. And so you'd walk into the sports hall, and it was like a basketball hall, you know, just with a hard floor, just a big rectangle. And you'd walk in, and to your left would be the little snack bar. So you'd look out at the hall, and there would be Sean Gandini and a couple of his acolytes. There would be Steve Rawlings. There would be maybe Paul Morocco. Who else? Piers Halfpenny. There would be Piers Halfpenny, this crazy old Irishman who sadly died a couple of years ago. But before he died, I booked him on one of my shows. And he'd been juggling since forever. And all these people, and my friend Dave, the great Dave, Dave Evans, who I met there when he was 14, and we'd all just hang out. We'd do some practice. I would practice a bit, but I was very shy, and there were a lot of them much better jugglers than me there. So I was like, I'm just going to watch. And we'd have.
What were the people like? Were they all quite big characters? As a shy person, was it difficult to be part of the group? Or
they weren't really, I don't think they were really big. Well, Paul Morocco is always a big character. Paul Morocco can't be anything other than a big character. But everyone else was kind of just there to practice. So that was, you know, the equalizer. You know, there'd be Sean Gandini there, who was, I think at that point, just starting to perform with like Rara Zoo and stuff. And he's an incredibly good juggler. But there would be other jugglers who never had an inkling of stepping on stage that were as good as him. You know, it was interesting that this hobby juggling thing. And yeah, so that, I mean, that was the first little taste of, oh, this could be a family. This could be, you know, there are people here, you know, and Dave, I met Dave then, and I am still very close with Dave, you know, and we've worked together a lot. Those two things are when I...
Was that the first opportunity for public performance as well? Because was this just juggling in the bedroom before this?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'd call that public performance because everyone was a juggler, but yeah, that was the first.
Do you know what I mean? It's just you're doing it in front of people.
Yeah, to an extent. Let's have a think. Hang on, when did I? Yeah, you're right. That would have been it. And then quite soon after that, so I was at college. I left school, went to college for 2 years, and did quite well, but at no point wanted to do the thing that I was at college to do, you know. And then after...
And what did you go to do in college?
I studied, there's a name for it, but it's like a set of sort of courses that fit together into a thing, you know. But basically it was child psychology. The idea was, because I was good at computers, the idea was I would go into... I would learn all about child psychology and then go into developing software and hardware for to help children and teenagers with disabilities, which would have been of much more worth to the world, but it wouldn't have involved so much applause. So
no, but also as well, it's quite a statement to say I was in college planning to go forward and do this thing, because most people going to college don't have such a set plan out. So that's an interesting thing in and of itself.
I didn't have a plan at the time. I went to college. At the point I started college, I still didn't think that juggling could be a real job. I still didn't think that. But over the course of my course, the 2 years, I slowly realized that whether it could or not, I needed to give it a try. You know, you get that thing, that itch, and you can't walk away from it. You have to, you know. And then there was a moment, we're jumping around a little bit, but there was a moment towards the end actually at the end of the college course, in the last few weeks, where I'd been working with someone in the computer department, because I was quite good at computers. And they said, there's a job going here that I'll recommend you for. And basically, they kind of heavily implied you can just walk into it. And I was kind of, at this point, I still wasn't confident I could earn money doing juggling. So I was like, oh, brilliant. Okay, well then I'll do that then, I guess. And I went to the interview, and when I got there, I realized there's no possible way I can get this job. And the whole, oh, I can recommend you, you'll get it, was rubbish. And I felt so humiliated. And I thought, well, if that's what the conventional work world has for me, I'm going to give this a try then, you know? Yeah. So I think there's an element of, okay, well, screw you then. Screw you, straight normal world, you know?
Yeah. And so how did you take those steps forward then? How did you put your fingers to the working world and go and juggle?
I left college. I told my parents that I didn't want to be a child psychologist, but I wanted to be a juggler, and they were super thrilled. And I signed on the dole for 6 months. And for 6 months, every single day, and please forgive me, it was the 80s. Every single day, I got on my unicycle and I rode down to the local park. And I spent all day practicing all the things I had. So balls, clubs, Diablo, devil sticks. I think that was it. That was mainly it, yeah. Until it got dark and I came home. Every day for 6 months. Once a week, I would have to go in to the dole office and they would say, are you looking for work? And I'd say yes, and I was not.
Well, you were looking for work as a juggler.
Well, I was doing work training, you know. And then two things happened. I got spotted. Someone came up to me in the park and said, "Do you do shows?" And I went, "Yes." And I'd never done a show, but I knew that I had to, you know. And he knew a local kind of kids entertainer who he thought could use me. And I started out with him doing a couple of sort of wandering juggling bits. And at the same time, Dave at Colombo Street Sports Centre on a Sunday, which I was still going to, said, last week I did an audition at Covent Garden to be a street performer, and you should do that. And the next Tuesday I was there doing an audition. And it sounds, you know, super poetic and overly flowery, but honest to God, I turned up, I arrived, looked at all the reprobates underneath the portico on the West Piazza and went, oh, fuck, that's my family. There they are. You know, it was really, and as I say, I get a bit emotional. You know, my real family were not often the best, but these people who I'm still in, you know, I'm still friends with many of them. I still love them so hard. The first person I talked to was a guy called Mustafa Funky, whose name is Rick, who I still talk to on Facebook occasionally. He was a really good juggler, really fluid, nice juggler. There was Paddy Bramwells, there was Dave, there was, I mean, just Ozzy. There were all these people who became my older brothers and sisters. Aileen, I see you, Aileen. You know, and from that day, I was there for 20 years. I arrived a know-nothing teenager, scared of everything, and I left a grown-ass married man with a house and scared of everything.
What was your first day there like then? What was it like when you went to go and do your audition? I
was on 11 o'clock. I arrived at about 10:30, and there was no one on the pitch because that's early it was like a weekday. That's early. I think it was a Wednesday. Rick, Mustafa Funky, was standing by the list, and I knew him. I think I'd seen him at the sports centre occasionally, and he could be a little bit brusque. And I didn't know if there was. Well, just
by brusque.
I don't want to diss Rick. I love Rick. Rick's the best. that thing that street performers have, especially in the 80s, of when they see someone they don't know coming up to them, it's like, oh, what idiot question are they going to ask? You know? And I didn't know if there was a show on before me or not. So I walked up to him. I remember it vividly. I will never forget this. I said, excuse me, is there a show on now? And he said, oh, no, there's some idiot doing a tryout at 11 o'clock. I was like, oh, that's me. And he went, oh. And I went out and I did a show. And I had put some work into a structure for a show. It had...
what was your structure? Yeah, I think I started with... Was I doing basketballs at that point? I don't know if I was or not. I think I was. I think I was starting with spinning basketball. So one finger and then two, and and then you've got a high skill level at this point. Before
not bad. Not bad. Because a couple of years of being a shut-in at that point. So yeah.
You've done your hours.
Yeah, I did some Diablo, and my finish was 4 sink plungers. Because funny, I guess.
Yeah. Plungers are funny things.
Funny thing, right? Which, funny enough, obviously, like decades later, in one of my shows, I had Dave Gorman on, and Dave Gorman can juggle. Dave Gorman used to do an act juggling sink plungers. I was like,
really?
No way. Yeah.
I never put him down as a juggler.
Yeah, he juggled on my show. He was like, thank you. I was like, son of a bitch, come on, that's not fair. It's the one thing I do. So
yeah, but you probably do it a little bit better than he does.
He does it more lucratively. So I did a show, got a small audience, made £16. Went home, my brain just fizzing with, I did a thing. The things, the same feelings that I have now after a show, the things that I thought in my head, I said them and did them, people liked them, and now I've got money. What the hell? And that was it. Yeah, hooked.
And were you critical, or were you very positive at that time of your first piece of work?
I am super critical of myself now. Back then, I was a teenager. I think it was a little bit of both. I think partly I've always been shy. I've always been self-critical. So I probably was. But I think outwardly I was probably a bit of a dick, and probably a bit sort of... Am I allowed to swear on this show?
Yeah, you can swear. Yeah, it's not for kids. It's okay.
I was a little bit full of piss and vinegar, a little bit. And that endorphin thing you get from having thought of a thing, done it, people clapped you, strangers are looking at me and clapping and giving me their money. I'm a god, So there's an element of that. So I think if you talk to people like Paddy and about what I was like when the year that I arrived, and I was like 18, 17, they would probably say, he was full of himself, because I just found the thing that I immediately knew was the thing. And I just was so, I don't know, I was so happy. I was so happy that I found a thing that I could do and that I loved and worked, And
did you feel, was there a sense of, well, you've said it, I think, clearly, but I'm going to reiterate it anyway, a sense of you felt you'd established who you were at the same time. You understood who you were, maybe, the place you could sit in the world.
A little bit, yeah. I think it took me a long time to kind of reach my final form. But it's certainly, perhaps the other way of saying it is that it showed me, rather than, I'm going to do a clumsy analogy, rather than that was the experiment, which kind of the result of which was, this is who I am. At least I'd found the lab. I'd found the place where I could develop myself, both as a performer and as a creative, but also as a person. Because again, I was just a kid. I was a teenager. I didn't know I was an idiot. I see that Andre Vincent is watching. He will tell you embarrassing stories about me. He's known me since forever. You're a kid. You're a knob, and you're an idiot. You know nothing, but you
not
think
by
you know
default.
Yeah, you think you know everything. You know nothing. But what I did know is I could do this, and it makes me feel something I hadn't felt before. So that was enough to cling on to.
So what were the second, third, and fourth shows like? What was the development like then? You integrate into the community, and
I have no memory of any more specific shows, except for the ones where something crazy happened. The way we all remember those ones.
Yeah.
But what I do remember from that point on was the community, the family of performers that I fell in love with. Andre is watching, and Andre was, I think the first couple of years I was there, he was quite hard on me, and it took me a while to realize he was doing it because I don't want to speak for him, but I think he saw something in me, and again, I get a bit emotional talking about that, but the one of the top 5 happiest moments of my life, top 5, up there with wedding, up there with secret place in Italy that I go to with my wife, is every single breakfast I went to in a cafe with the Covent Garden buskers. I cannot even begin to describe how important those mornings were to me. Being accepted into a group, because I was a loner. Can
you explain the process of going to the cafe for people who might not know about it, for the record, so to speak?
So I don't know how the Covent Garden sign-in process works now, but back when I started in the late 80s, you would get there super early, just ridiculously early, and then at 10 o'clock, you would go down the list, first come, first serve. Person who was there first gets first choice at the show, etc. That a few years later that got changed because it was inherently not fair and was being that system was being compromised by certain street performers without the moral compass that they should have had. Windsor, which meant that you would all get there early, and then you would have to hang around at least until 10 in the morning. So you'd all go to the cafe. Maria's round the corner. Maria's was where I had my first date with the girl that became my wife. But before that, I had a lot of dates with people like Andre and Paddy, and you would just sit there for hours. And first things first, that was the first time I'd been to a greasy spoon in my life. So suddenly I was being shown these immense and glorious breakfasts. Oh, come on. Yeah. And there was a room full of street performers who all were all funnier than me and all joking with each other and teasing each other and then telling stories and then contributing ideas to each other's shows. And I was just sitting there sponging all of this, sponging how to be a good performer, sponging how to be a grown-up, how to have a conversation in a place, with other people. It was just those mornings were formative in my journey out of childhood into adulthood, and I always look back on them fondly. And it's very sad where I walk through Covent Garden now, and all those cafes we used to go to, there was Maria's, there was Diana's Diner, there was I forget the other ones. They've all gone now. They're all not there anymore, and it's really sad. These little independently owned
into crab cafes.
Is that what it is?
One of them's turned into a crab cafe where you can go and have crab.
I was thinking, what is that? That must be a name for something I don't understand. No, it's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah. The name's what it is. It's Covent Garden has suffered from gentrification, but we are in the present and we should be in the past at this moment. So how did you develop from this point then? Because we're not talking to Mat Ricardo, the street performer in Covent Garden now. We're talking to Mat Ricardo, the variety entertainer who's travelled the world.
Yes.
There's a journey from there.
I didn't really do much of that stuff for a long time. I was happy. I remember at some point it would have been at about the 10-year mark, I think, maybe a little less. Rob Ballard, who I think you've had on the show.
Yeah, we had Rob on. Yeah,
delightful and wonderful Rob Ballard. I remember him asking me, it would have been in one of these cafes, what I wanted to do, what my plan was, and I was a little bit blindsided by that. I was like, but I like this. This is the best. I was still in my early 20s.
What kind of show were you doing then? Were you doing a show which was kind of a hack show? Was it an original show? Was it the gentleman juggler you are today?
It wasn't quite, well, the first 2 or 3 years, it wasn't the gentleman juggler I am today. I don't think it was hack. I've always tried to not be hack. I'm sure, there were a bunch of lines in there that were not mine, but I've always tried to not be completely hack. That's faint praise for myself, isn't it? I've always tried to do something. I don't know. What's the point of doing a creative job if you're not being creative? I mean, so I was doing a little bit of stuff with yo-yos. I was doing some. There was a point a couple of years on where I was finishing with 4 torches, triple singles. What else was I doing? I don't remember. Oh, I have a 5-ball routine, 5-ball net catch things. So again, a little bit up in skill, and then a couple of years on from that. So within 4 years from when I started, I would have started doing gentleman jugglery stuff and started playing with tablecloths and all that stuff. And
before we get on to Rob, it's locked in my mind. We will get back to that because I think it's a very interesting point, and I sense I have an idea where that might go. Just for now, why start the gentleman juggler thing? Why move in that direction?
As we mentioned earlier, I'm a nerd, so I like to do my research on everything. I love to find if I was going to pick up, I don't know, if I was going to start doing a trick with a Rubik's cube, I'd want to know what had been done before me, so I didn't repeat it, or so I could develop it. Who were the great Rubik's cube practitioners? Where was the Rubik's cube invented? That appeals to me, knowing about things. So I was struggling a bit in trying to find a way to be original with clubs and balls and traditional juggling props. So I went. I wonder who it was. I have a feeling it was Piers Halfpenny that told me to do this. I went to the Westminster Library archives on Marylebone High Road, and they had an archive of a thing called the Strand magazine, which was the Time Out of late Victorian London. It is famously known for it is the magazine in which the Sherlock Holmes stories were first published as a serial thing. But what it also had occasionally, when a variety show came to town, they described all the acts in great detail. So I sat there for 2 weeks. I'd come to Covent Garden, sign on for a show, go to the library, do a few hours and then come back and do the show. Just looking at all the old acts and making notes until something hit. And there was an act, I remember it, there was an act called Anyhow on Toast. I mean, what a name for a show. Anyhow on Toast. It's insane. And it was a gentleman juggling, well, it was more of a restaurant juggling act. It was a group thing. There was
what's the difference between restaurant juggling and gentleman juggling then?
Restaurant juggling, he's set in a restaurant, uses mainly restaurant props. So restaurant juggling, plate spinning, stuff like that. Usually
and
done.
Would the character usually be a waiter or someone like that trying to fulfill an order?
Yeah, usually done with there's one person playing a customer, one person playing a waiter, and they'd have a set. Gentleman juggler, more a sort of solo thing, more kind of dapper little playboy character, So this was technically a restaurant juggling act. And they did all this stuff, and it was done like a sketch. It was done like a short piece of theatre. A customer would come in, he would throw his hat to the waiter would catch it and throw it into a hat stand. And everything was a trick. And every single trick I'd never heard of before. And my mind was blown. I was like, oh, of course, if you can juggle, you don't just have to juggle what they sell you to juggle with. You can juggle with anything. And then so, so from that point on, I was like, right, well, if you can juggle anything, then why would I not juggle, other things?
What was the first experiments like then?
I think it was probably hat tricks, because that was a thing jugglers did, was hat tricks. Andre's a good hat juggler. And getting from that, I'm not sure exactly when I started doing tablecloth pull, but I know that I started doing it because I saw a shop in Chinatown selling fold-up tables, and I was like, "Whoa!" And it's that thing of, if you find a prop, you'll find a use for it, And the fold-up tables were huge. They were mahjong tables. They were huge and heavy, but they were metal, so I could lock them up around the back of the church with the unicycles. So yeah, once I started doing tablecloth pull, then therefore my.
And we're still within this. We're in this 10 years. We've not reached.
Oh yeah, no, we're in
lightning bolt moment.
No, we're in about 5 years here. Yeah. So once you start
92, maybe something like that, 1992.
Yeah, 91, 92-ish. Yeah. And it all just kind of grew from there, and I was doing the pull for about a year before I started thinking about putting it back, and by that point I was using a wallpapering fold-out table.
And what was the process for this for learning? Did you see the table pull somewhere and you thought, well, this is great? And did you have this idea then of you can juggle anything? You've got this gentleman character from the past and you're pulling these different strands together then?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where I saw the tablecloth pull, but that's kind of what I like about it, is that everyone knows it. It's that thing where if any dad at a party will just lean down and take the edge of the cloth and go, huh? And everyone knows, it's got that, it's in culture, it's in people's personal cultures. So I just, I the first time I did it, I didn't know you could go and buy material. So I just had I went to the Covent Garden Market and got a cheap knockoff kind of Hermes scarf. And that was just about big enough. And then, and then if you've got a table, my overly logical mind, if you've got a table, then all the things on the table should be things that you do tricks with. So that's, you start to think, well, what can I do? Plates, spoons, Yeah.
Yeah. And so in terms of the writing process, the gentleman character has come in during this time. You're now
it's on the way.
Dressing like a gentleman.
It's on the way. It's a slow process.
So it's organically forming. Yeah. And when you start doing the tablecloth pull, and when you start realizing that you can use any prop to juggle with, you're not bound by clubs and balls and things like that. Do you then take those clubs and balls out of the show? Is there an active desire to undermine the bought props?
A little bit, yeah. I think I wanted to do, because I used to be, I'm not anymore, but I used to be quite good at ball juggling. So I think I seem to remember spending quite a long time trying to find good fake fruit that I could have in a fruit bowl on the table and I could juggle, and it doesn't exist. The trick is to use fruit. It's much heavier and much better to juggle. Oranges are really good juggling balls. So yeah, slowly. What was I? I'm trying to remember what the rest of the act was at that point, because the tablecloth. When I first started doing, this is how dumb I am. When I first started doing tablecloth pull, I put it as the opening trick in the show. I mean, the single most obvious finale in the history of entertainment, and I was opening my show with it. So it took me a while to. I bet someone like Andre said, "Oi, idiot!" That goes at the end. I bet someone did. I was doing Diablo.
Well,
Diablo is still in my street show. But
it's just what's quite nice about that. Sorry to derail you a little bit. Is that the writerly workshoppy community that is the back of the pitch crew in Covent Garden, the people who sit behind the performance and watch the shows. I mean, it was. I don't know how it is now, but it was, or at least my memory of it. I'm sure it wasn't by any means perfect, but my memory of it is that there were some genuine
mutual encouragement going on, and some real sort of help and collaboration. Because, you know, back then it was before the shows had started to, and I'm sorry if I'm dissing anyone here, but, you know, the shows over the years started to calcify a little bit into being more formulaic. Back then in the late 80s, early 90s, there was all sorts of crazy stuff. You know, there were people like Dr. Abrahams, Dr. Stewart, who, I mean, now you still have Mike, right? Who is kind of that ilk, with that craziness, that weird, dangerous clown vibe. There was a guy that used to come and perform Shakespeare beautifully.
Yeah. There was his name Shakespeare.
His name was Shakespeare. Yeah. Obviously, you've had other people telling you about Shakespeare. Yeah. And it was, he used to always take the really early show, like 10 o'clock, 10:30 or whatever, and it was captivating. You know, you'd have Paddy doing his huge show with nothing, with things in his pockets. You'd have Rob Ballard throwing knives at people. You know, a much wider diversity. So I think people didn't feel threatened about helping each other because it wasn't the same art form that we, you know. Yeah. I mean, certainly. Yeah. As I keep saying, I learned so much from these people about every aspect of artistry, professionalism, and life.
Yeah. And so, as the show's developing now, just before we reach Rob, what's the kind of? Is there a point before Rob where you where you think, right, this is the show? Because I felt this in my time, that you feel like there's a point where the show settles and you think, I know what the show is now. I know what the voice is for me, and
I think when my finale sort of clicked together. And that was even before I was putting the tablecloth back on. But my finale, which again is still my finale that I do when I work now, which was throwing the Diablo up, dropping the sticks, pulling the tablecloth, and then catching the Diablo on the edge of the tablecloth. I love that trick because it's so circular. It's like this goes this way, this goes this way, this comes down with arrogance, you know. And it's got a nice kind of audience hype bit that I really like doing, where I get the audience to count backwards from 3, 2, 1, and it's hokey. It's nothing new, but I think I do it well. I think I've got some nice gags in there. It really feels like if the show's working as it should, it ends with a woof, you know.
Yeah.
Then by that point, I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I'm good at this now. I'm not just scraping by. I think I'm good at this.
And that's when Rob swept into the breakfast cafe and decided to cut your feet from underneath you.
Well, yeah, Rob, because I think, again, Rob always saw something in me. You know, Rob has always been super encouraging. And he was like, so what do you want to do? You know? And I hadn't even thought about, I didn't think in terms of career. I still don't really. And I was like, I'm doing this. I'm literally doing my dream. My dream has come true. I'm able to make good money in the early 90s, late 80s, quite good money for someone living in a 40 quid a week bedsit in Wood Green. And I get to do a show that is now working. I'm with my friends every day. Why would I want any of this to change? This is fantastic. I have eggs on toast every morning. Why would I not want to go to a cafe every morning? And Rob was like, maybe you should think about what you just maybe think about that. I didn't, but you know, after a while I did. And at the same time, a lot of performers were going to Edinburgh. People were starting to go, like, I think Paddy, Andre, Alex Dandridge were starting to go places like Canada and Australia and to do festivals and stuff. And I was too scared. I would say that, well, no. you all go to Edinburgh. I'm going to stay here and clean up on the pitch that is now empty because you all go to Edinburgh. The fact was I was scared. I'd found the thing I could do. I'd used up all of my bravery to take this step into performing, to do this. And I had none left. And I was like, no, I'm scared to take the next step, you know. And it took years before I wasn't. And Dave helped with that. I guess another, I mean, if we're looking at 10 years, like another 15 years maybe, on me and Dave started working together. And he certainly helped me because we worked abroad a lot as a double act. So that helped me, you know.
This is 15 years of you in, so we're looking at, if you started at like 87, 86, 15 years in, you'd be like 2002. Is that sort of time?
Sounds about right. Around about 2000-ish. Yeah, I think. I'm bad at this stuff. I'm bad at dates.
So you were happy in Covent Garden. You were doing good shows. You were having a good time. You were satisfied to some extent.
Yeah.
You weren't going there because you were nervous, but why did you want to go there? Why was there a conflict about it if you're happy where you are?
Yeah.
But why? Why is there a conflict?
Why
do you want to go to these places?
Why do I want to go? What?
No, but why do you want to go to these places? Why is the conflict?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Initially, there was a conflict. I think I was pretty happy telling myself, no, they can all go around the world. What are they going to find? Why would you go on a plane to go to Australia to go to a pitch? I got a pitch. I got the best pitch in the world right here. Why would I, you know? Because I was too dumb to realize that, you know, if your job allows you to go all over the world, you should do that. It is now, you know, one of the things I prize most about my job is that it allows me to travel. It's beautiful and amazing. So people started coming back with stories of things, and I started to get jealous. I started to get that I'm missing out here. But it took a long time, and like I say, it took.
As the kids today would call it, FOMO.
FOMO, exactly.
FOMO.
Yeah, totally. But it took working with Dave so I could hold Dave's hand while we went abroad.
So where did he take you?
Where did he take me? He's not my dad, you know. Yeah, kind of. So where did we start working? So he, I don't know if you've interviewed Dave or not on this. And
not yet. He's booked in. He will be in the next month, I believe. Yeah.
Excellent. He broke his back doing naked forward rolls on the edge of a cliff, drunk. Now, there was no sympathy for that. There was no sympathy. Naked forward rolls, drunk on the edge of a cliff. He deserved all he got. But
literally living on the edge.
So then when he rehabilitated and he had not, things could have gone very bad and it was a very scary time. He could work again, but he couldn't do his high unicycle because the act of jumping off a high unicycle and impacting the floor could have had impact. Yeah. So we put a show together of bits of each of our solo shows so that, you know, so he could work and we like each other and we've been working together off and on for a few years. And I do love that show very much. And we took it to a variety festival in Germany. We got picked up by a chain of variety theatres in Germany. So we did a few seasons.
Before we go on to that stuff, just for your experience, had you been abroad? You've been abroad before, just on holiday?
Yeah, I'd been abroad before. I had I'd done a bit of work abroad. I'd been to Malta. I went to Malta chasing a girl and got to Malta, failed with the girl. But because I was a 20-year-old street performer at the time, of course, I'm going abroad, take your gear. So I did a street show in by the city gates of Valletta, the capital city of Malta. The city gates, and this is important, being the only way in and out of the city. I got a crowd, not massive, but big enough to block the gates. So I shut down the entire city. Thus, I got arrested at gunpoint. Now, in any other country, that would get you deported. In Malta, it gets you a gig. I made the front page of the papers, and someone offered me a gig. So I went back a few months later and did a gig there, and I ended up going back and doing a couple of gigs there. So yeah, I had worked abroad a little bit. I'd been abroad bits and pieces. Yeah.
So were you nervous? What was the experience like for you traveling off and doing these gigs for the first time then? Because it seems like it was a decision to make. It was a change for you.
Yeah, it was. I don't think I was nervous. I think at that point I knew that I was good. I knew that Dave was good. I knew that the act was strong. Deep down, I knew that I think I had wrung everything out of Covent Garden. And if I was to have a career, I would have to find it elsewhere. So yeah, we did some nice seasons and started to work. I spent a few years working a lot abroad.
And were you guys on the road? Was this you and Dave on the road together, staying in motels, driving a van about? What was the experience? Not
driving a van. Usually getting a plane to a place, and having a low to mid-priced hotel. And we did sort of all the big European festivals, your Linz's, and
were you organising that? Was Dave organising that? Who was doing the logistics of this kind of thing? Because that doesn't just happen by itself, surely.
Dave had the hookup. So Dave, it was mainly Dave they were talking to us. I was basically I was luggage. I was the prop. Dave I think did most of the heavy lifting there. By that point, I knew of this circuit. I knew of all these places, but I hadn't really. I'd done it a little bit sporadically, but this is the first time I'd gone, no, this is where we will mostly work now, So I did that. I've missed out something.
Okay, we can go back if you like. Yeah.
So this is how I knew that circuit. I knew that circuit because a couple of years earlier, I'd done a summer-ish of it working in a double act with Steve Rawlings. I don't know if you're aware of Steve Rawlings. Yeah.
So we did an interview with Steve
about a month ago.
Yeah. He did mention yourself.
Oh, did he? Uh-oh.
Yes.
So we did a double act together. I was not really. It was his show and I was the other guy in it. And it was so we did a bunch of European kind of mainly German small theaters, art centers and stuff. It was good. It was mainly for me. It was good to like you say, to have my eyes open to that world existing. So then when I went back to do similar stuff with Dave, I wasn't nervous. I was like, okay, yeah, I know this. I can do this. And that was a nice way to do it, to originally go essentially as a cast member of Steve's show, even though I was the only cast member a lot of the time. But still, it felt less pressure. So it gave you an ability to sort of observe the mechanisms before having to operate the machine. Yes, quite so. Yes. So then me and Dave did a bunch, a couple 2-3 years of a lot of stuff in Europe, and it was good.
And did you see at that time that you and Dave were going to be a double act forever, and that you were going to, be old men performing on the boards at the time?
Oh God, I can totally see me and Dave as old, crusty old 100-year-old vaudevillians. That's a really nice thought, actually. I don't know. I don't think I ever thought of it either way. I think there was an element. You'd have to ask him. I think there was an element deep down of this is a show we put together when he was injured. And that stuff takes years, but slowly he is becoming less injured. So I think probably we both had certainly the second half of our performing time together. We probably both had one eye on at some point we're going to go back to doing solo work, and that's fine. There's no. Yeah. I don't mean that in any sort of antagonistic way, and nothing but love for Dave. And
you understood what the interaction was.
Yeah,
and what the relationship was at the time.
Yeah, yeah, you know, it had its lifespan. It was a good natural lifespan. We stopped doing it, and then let's have a think. About 4 years ago, we got an offer to go back to our favorite festival and do it for one more summer, for 1 month. And we went back and did it. And it was so fun relearning our script and just laughing at each other's jokes genuinely. It was really nice. But I think that's probably
reliving it.
Yeah, it was nice. And it came back real easy. But I think that's probably done now. I think we're both super fine with that, you know, in the most healthy way.
Yeah. And so when we go back to when you're traveling around, you've done the 3 years with Dave. You've both gone your own ways. What comes next? What's the next steps after that then?
By that point, I knew I was good, and I knew that I wanted lots more things. But the problem was I'd been working a lot abroad, mostly abroad, and mostly with Dave. And I had not been at home much. And I was and am married. And it was taking a toll on my real life.
So the partner wasn't coming with you on the tours?
The partner has a real life, you know, yeah. So it's interesting as I'm kind of forming the words. The good thing about finding all these foreign venues to work were they exist. The bad thing is, if I want to keep doing this as a career, I have to leave the country all the time, and that sucks. So I kind of, on the last one of those variety theatre contracts, which were each 2 months, on the last one, I had a real bad time. My mental health spiraled massively. I was.
And do you mind me asking why do you think that happened? Was it the stress, the pressure?
The stress, the pressure, the being away, being isolated. I was in a small town, like an hour outside of a city, living in the same building as the theatre, doing nothing but shows, you know, super unhealthy. And missing my real life, my non-performing life.
Yeah.
And I kind of hit hard, and I had a very bad time. I had what one of my therapists would refer to as a significant episode. So I went home, and also while I was away, a very good friend back home died, and I wasn't there for it, and that's hard, you know. So by the time I got home from that gig, I was kind of the opinion, I don't think I can do this job anymore, because I can't be at home and do this job. And being at home with the people I love, the person I love, is more important than the job. And if I go away because strangers will clap me and leave my wife here on her own to deal with one of our friends dying, that makes me a bad person. That's the wrong choice to make, you know. So I decided to quit. And I'd been a hobby photographer for a couple of years. And I thought, well, let's try and be a photographer instead. So I started taking portraits of performers and started to build a portfolio. And I started to, within a few months, I started to get gigs. And I started to earn a meager living, not anything comparable to.
When you say gigs as a photographer, what is a gig as a photographer?
Headshots, portrait shoots. I did a few sort of coverage of live shows because I knew about theatre, I knew about performing, so I sort of played that up in my photographer brand, you know. So I was good at taking photos of shows and stuff like that. And then I thought, well, I'd always said that one day I will take a show to the Edinburgh Fringe. So I thought, right, well, if I'm going to quit this, then I will take a one-man show. I will write a one-man show, take it into the Edinburgh Fringe, do it, and then I will have done it. You know, it's a thing to have said.
Have you worked the street there before?
Me and Dave did one Fringe there as a double act on the street. That was all, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, well, if I'm going to quit, let's take that. You know, write a show, take it to the Fringe, do it on the free Fringe. Then I'm done. Yeah. I can pack that away and be a photographer. So I did that, and the show did really well and got like incredibly good reviews. And I just sort of, it hooked me back in. Yeah. And I thought to
just before we go on, why did you want to go to Edinburgh and do this one last show?
Because
why was that important?
I don't know. I would imagine probably someone said it to me at some point. You know, there was, well, if you're serious, you'll do this. You know, it's essentially it's a meaningless marker. You know, but
most markers are meaningless apart from the meaning you put onto them.
Exactly.
I mean, for you, was it one of the tickets to be stamped, so to speak? It was a bucket list.
Yeah, I think it was the thing that would allow me to close that, you know, the book on being a performer. You know, I started off there, I got to here, boom, done. You know, it was a full stop. You know, and it was also
it's gone boom. Oh, sorry, carry on.
It did well, and I got picked up by a producer and brought back in a proper venue for the next year, and I won quite a prestigious theatre award for it. And it was like, and that taught me everything I needed to know. That taught me that if there's no circuit, you fucking make one. You know, you do it on your own terms. It was free Fringe. It was just a room. It was a room so shitty that I'm not tall. I'm 5'10" on a good day if it's warm. And there was a point on my stage where I could get myself like wedged between the floor and the ceiling. It was enough. And Andre came to see it, and Andre said something that I will never forget. Him and our mutual friend Lizzie Roper sat in the front row, and afterwards Andre just sort of grabbed me by the lapel and went, "That was a really nice little show," and it meant the world. And it showed that shit. If I want, I can find a cheap venue. I can write something. I can do it. People will come and they'll like it. So I'm going to do that now. So that's what I did. You know.
Just out of interest, before we go on to that and to the forming of that, what was that show? What was the goal of that show? What were the aims when you wrote that show?
There's no way to say it without sounding a bit arty-farty. It was called Three Balls in a New Suit, and it was my story. It was about my life. And as I look back on it now, this was not conscious, but clearly it was a way of sort of summing it all up and then going, boom, now we can move it. You know, now it's all in one place. We can. Yeah. Yes, Ian Dean in the chat. That was in the Three Sisters. Yeah, so it was about my life. I told some stories about my life. I told some stories about the art form, some stuff about W.C. Fields and stuff. I did a bunch of tricks. It was, I think, funny. There were moments that were quite heartfelt, which was new for me, but has become part of my shtick. And I really, I'd never done, you know, you do 40 minutes on the street. But indoors, I'd only ever really done like 10-minute spots. To do a whole hour, fucking terrifying.
And how did you go about forming that stuff then? How did you? Because you've done bits in places, you worked in a double act, you've got a lot of experience. So how did you take that and then forge an hour-long piece of stage performance with that?
I just sat down and wrote. I treated it like the way a cabaret singer would. So, you know, cabaret singer will come out, start with a song, and then do a little bit of chat, and then do another song, and then do a little bit of chat, and do another song. So that's how I did it. I remember thinking this. The songs are the routines, and then in between the bit of chat. You know, and obviously finish on tablecloth. And I put together some new stuff like that. There's a hat and cane routine that I created for that show, which I like. And taught me. It's funny saying this as a street performer, because street performers are by nature super self-reliant, and we make it from ourselves. But I think maybe I'd lost a bit of that, and that taught me that you can use that street performing mentality of find the pitch, get the crowd, do what you want. You can use that not just in the street, you can use that in any area of the arts. And yeah, so that was a really useful lesson.
What do you mean you can use that in any area of the arts? Like
there wasn't, the sort of show I did, and this is not me bigging myself up to any degree, but it didn't really, a juggler doing bits of heartfelt shtick, and telling stories in between juggling routines, that's not really a thing. That's not a thing. If you go and see a juggling show, you expect to see a circusy thing or a cirque thing, or, and to approach it kind of like a stand-up, make it personal, make it, about me. Tell before I did cigar boxes, I did a big thing about the history of cigar boxes, where they come from, why jugglers use them. Here are some people, you've probably heard of W.C. Fields, well, before he was famous, So by the time you bring out the props and do the tricks, it means so much more to people because they know all about them, stuff like that.
And when you say as well, finding your own crowd, so the inference I took from that is that on the street, you find a space and you make a crowd. And so, for instance, the chap I mentioned quite a lot in these things, you look at Stuart Lee. Stuart Lee is seen to have made his own crowd in comedy by doing the kind of working men's clubs throughout the country, the arts centres and that kind of thing. And that's kind of what I thought you were talking about, is that you've made your own crowd, you've made your own scene, so to speak, to be accessed, to be consumed.
That was certainly true since from about that point onwards up to now and beyond, hopefully. That was certainly true, because at the same time that I was doing that show, the burlesque resurgence was hitting its peak, and I was getting booked on the occasional burlesque show. And with burlesque came a revival in cabaret, but cabaret was still kind of mainly music based and mainly sexy and for adults. So I saw my job, and still do, as to extend that. So burlesque begat cabaret, cabaret can begat variety. So to bring back variety where there's probably not going to be a burlesque performer on, it's not music based. There might be music, but it is about a variety of things, and yeah, from that point of view, certainly slowly starting to cultivate an audience of people who saw me on a bill and would follow me to my own show, hopefully, and I by no means have a sizable following of any degree. I have to struggle, I'm just at the night that we're recording this, tomorrow, I'm going to announce my return to live shows after the pandemic lockdown, and I'm going to have to push it hard because I'm not Stuart Lee. I can't just announce a tour and have it sell out. I'm still to most people, what I do needs explaining. Do you know what I mean? And that's always
just I'm very interested in stuff, but I just want to drag you back to after your show in Edinburgh, and we'll address this contemporary stuff a little bit later on.
Sure.
So you've done that Edinburgh show, you sold out, you got picked up by an agent, you're doing shows there, the burlesque sort of revival is happening this time. Are you then going and booking your own venues and putting your own shows on? Is that the process you take after that? Or are you working with an agent? Are they booking you out in places? How's your life changing after that?
At that point, he wasn't an agent, but he was a producer. So he ran some venues at Edinburgh. So I worked with him for the next 2 years of Edinburgh shows. So the next year I did a return season of Three Balls and a Good Suit, but we had to change its title for legal reasons. So it became Three Balls and a New Suit.
Why did you have to change it for legal reasons?
Oh, I don't know. He told me we did.
Was it somebody else that had some name somewhere? There's some copyright infringement?
No, I think probably there was a thing of coming back with the same title after you've premiered it somewhere. There was, I don't know, there was something. I just did what he said. And then the year after that, I wrote a whole new show called Vaudeville Schmuck. And he booked me out on, he used to book sort of burlesque and cabaret shows and used to host them as well. So he booked me for a bunch of those. And also we did a very small amount of Three Balls and a Good Suit tour dates, but not many, but a few. Yeah. But it was certainly it was a step into that. Yeah.
Was that a change in your life then? Was that different than what was going on before in your life, or was it? It was.
Yeah. It felt. It was the first time that I on my own would be the show people were going out to see. As an act, as a speciality act, you are normally a part of a show, and people aren't coming out to see you; they're coming out to see the show. But this was the thing, it's my name on the poster. It's my face. I might be only getting 20 people through the door, but those 20 people chose to come and see me. They didn't they didn't think, oh, we'll go out and find something good. They saw me, Googled me, went, yeah, came to see me. And still now, every single person, every solitary person that does that, it's immense. It's immense.
And did that feel... Was that a different way of engaging with your audience and engaging with who you are presented to your audience? Did that change the way you dealt with your work? Yeah.
Again, when you're just an act on a bill, you're just like a hired gun. You're an assassin. You just run in, bang, 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 run out. Your job is you've got 10 minutes to drop jaws. That's it, get the big laughs, bing, bang, boom, go. When you're doing especially my shows, which from the first one were always quite personal. I never shied away from talking about real things because, I have a theory about that. But it's...
You've got to tell us your theory now you've said it.
So I'm a fan of professional wrestling. And I have a lot of friends who are professional wrestlers, and I have.
When you say professional wrestling, you mean like faux professional wrestling. You don't mean Greek, Roman,
that's amateur wrestling.
Roman, Greek, Greco. Yeah,
Greco-Roman. That's amateur wrestling. That's amateur. I think you find the professionals have costumes.
The professionals are the ones who pretend to do it, right?
How dare you, sir? I have to say, because I have a lot of friends that are wrestlers. The correct way to say it is it's not fake, it's real, but it's predetermined. I could talk about wrestling for all day, every day. But wrestling for me is very similar to things like street performing and variety because it's a lowbrow art form. It's populist. People that haven't ever really watched it kind of think, oh, it's fucking shit, isn't it? But then if you actually watch it, just like with a street performer, the more you watch it, the more you go, oh, actually, this is clever. There's some high level theater going on here. It's really interesting like that. But my thing is, if you go and see a wrestling match, if you have never seen any wrestling, if you go and see like the WWE, the big wrestling company, weekly TV shows, if you go and see one of their live shows, if you walk in a little bit late after a match has already started, so you're sitting there watching, there's two guys in the ring, they're wrestling. Okay, it's good. That was good. We did a backflip. Brilliant. Yay. That's fine, But if you have been following the TV shows for the last 5 years, so you remember when this guy first arrived on the scene, his relationship with that, well, they used to be friends, but then this happened and that happened, and then last year this happened, but oh no, and so you've got all this context about character and circumstance and situation. You are invested before they've even thrown a punch because you know why they're fighting. So that's my approach to the theatre, is share yourself so they care about you. Anyone can come on and do a trick, and people don't care about tricks. People care about people doing tricks. So if I've told them, I don't know, as a random example, if I've told them where I learned this trick, who taught me, what it means to me, what I think about when I do it, why I chose this music. Then I do it. It means so much more theatrically, and they've learned something about the real me, because that stuff's got to be true, you know.
Does it have to be true, or is it just better that it's true?
It doesn't have to be true. You know, it's the film studio head Samuel Goldwyn. The famous quote from him was, "Showbiz is all about sincerity. If you can fake that, you're made." But for me, it has to be true. You know, for me, it's a privilege to have anyone in the audience, and I give them, without wishing to sound knobby, I give them all of me. You know, when they make me happy, it's real. You know, when things happen in a show and you find yourself laughing, that's real. So if that's real, shouldn't the rest? But, you know, when I talk about stuff in the last show that I did versus the world, I talked at the end quite a lot about my mental health and about how that influenced the entire show. And that, you know, if they go out knowing that that was real, that's of worth, I think. That's of worth.
Yeah. And you're also dealing with something more meaningful that a lot of variety acts would dare touch upon. Because if it's a real human experience, it has to be, you know. It loses that veneer that some shows have, that they exist in a non-emotional bubble kind of thing, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, no, and there's a space for that, absolutely, you know. Yeah. But for me, it's especially for a solo show, it's always intimate, you know. And I you know, I'm not famous. I don't work big venues. I work in small, intimate venues where the front row are usually close enough to slap, you know. So yeah, I like it to be intimate and have an intimacy of subject as well as form.
And so I assume that now you're running, you're doing shows. When you did the big show, which is going to be the ending show, and you started working with the agent, you then started traveling, doing variety acts and producing shows. And has that been pretty consistent up until now, or is there something you've done in between then? Is the stuff you've done developing up that's changed, or something particularly sincere you've worked on?
Yeah, I mean, I've been, you know, creating more one-man shows over the years. I also, the other thing that I did, you know, and these first couple of years of doing Edinburgh and the stuff that came from that, and if I'm honest, you know, it sounds a little shallow and vain, but if I'm honest, winning a real proper theatre award, really, that came out of nowhere. I didn't know. I had no idea that was going to happen, and it's like that's the grown-up mainstream world going, no, that was of worth, and so that gives you confidence. So with that confidence, I could engage a little bit more with my mission of let's do variety. So then I started doing the Mat Ricardo's London Varieties projects, which were seasons of variety shows, but also keeping that sort of heartfelt genuineness to them. So I did a season of those. And
was that designed? Was that designed with the idea? Sorry to interrupt you. You mentioned earlier that you saw a revival in burlesque, and burlesque begot cabaret. Was this because you wanted to create this design variety? Is that why you started doing these events?
Absolutely. I saw that there was momentum that I could
so it's with a mission.
Capitalize
with a mission.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the idea behind those shows was to mix the up and coming or current stars of cabaret and variety with some of the legends. So I did a season at the Bethnal Green Working Men's Club, which was some of the greatest nights of my life. If I may,
can you explain the venue a little bit for everyone?
Do you know the Bethnal Green Working Men's Club?
I mean, I know of it slightly, but people who are watching might not. So can you just describe a little bit what the place is?
It is an old-fashioned blue collar working men's club that's been there for, I don't know, like 100 years more. I don't know. Been open for all that time, and it's in Bethnal Green, so it's in a very working class area of London. It's fantastic. I love it so much. It stinks. It's shabby. It's got a sticky floor. Not all the lights work. The sound system is so bad. The stage moves when you walk on it. Behind the stage, at the back of the stage, it's got a big red heart made out of red bulbs, and not all the bulbs work. And it took me years before I realized that was deliberate. I love them for that. It is one of the centers, if not the center in London, of the revival of burlesque and cabaret. It gets used for that stuff. It gets used for, there's a lot of drag stuff happens there. It's just, it's a fantastic venue. It's a fantastic, it's big enough to, you can pack a lot of people in, but it's intimate. I've had many of the best nights of my life there. It's a wonderful place. So it was perfect.
So you were telling us the first night you had there.
Well, I had, there was the one night I'd like to talk about or just mention from that season, because it was, anyone that was there shares my opinion, which I love. So I would, every month I would, one of the running things I do is I had a projector and I'd show an old variety act, and I'd just get the whole audience. I'd say, right, we're just going to take a breath, and I'll get them all to take a deep breath. And I'd say, right, we are no longer whatever the date is. Now it is, June 6th, 1969. You're in the audience of the London Palladium, and this is about to happen, And it was great. It was just so nice. So I did that once, and it was 1960 something. London Palladium, black and white, from Jimmy Tarbuck. It was Bruce Forsyth introducing this act called the Dior Dancers. And the Dior Dancers were what used to be called an adagio act. So it was three guys in tuxedos, a woman in a skimpy little dress, and they would just fling her around the stage. But like literally 30 feet in the air, somersaults, catching her by one arm just before she hit the ground. There's a bit where they threw her just 20 feet high into the wings. And then she comes walking on. Like it's amazing. There's a bit where one of them holds her ankles, the other one holds her wrist. They swing her like a skipping rope. The third guy skips. I mean, it's an insane act. So I show them this, and they're clapping and gasping as if it's live, right? And it finishes, and they all applaud. And it all quiets down, and I say to the audience, I say, when I see a show like that, an act like that, I want to find that girl, and I want to ask her what it was like. Don't you? And they went, yeah. And I went, let's do that. And she was in the fucking audience.
Wow.
And I go up on stage, and the place went unglued. And she sat on stage, and she has since, very sadly, she has left us. But she was super glamorous. And we sat on stage, and she told us all these scandalous stories of working in Las Vegas in the 50s. And, and just to have created a few moments like that to people. I also, on one of the shows, I led a line of chorus girls in a tap routine. I mean, these are life goals. So anyway, so that was really important. And the point of the show was to deliver moments like that,
And what's interesting with that is what you've done is something which you did in your private studies. You've looked and researched something in the past and managed to become more informed by it.
Yeah.
And what's nice about that is you then shared that with an audience. It's something that I share. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I do these videos is, unfortunately, we don't have a live component at the moment because of what's happening in the world, but we get to hear stories and hear the lives of people,
Yeah. Yeah, you get to find something and sort of clean it off and show it to someone else,
Yeah. You did a series of podcasts from there, didn't you? Am I right in thinking that?
So the next season we moved to the Leicester Square Theatre. I got a corporate sponsor, so I had some money. So we filmed the shows, 3-camera shoot, and so they're still online. You can go on my website and find them.
We will put the link at the end of the video.
Yeah, and they became podcasts of some of them as well, and we got big names. That's where we had Dave Gorman. We had Paul Daniels. I mean, we had these people who are legitimately.
Was that a nice experience for you, seeing Paul Daniels as a kid, and you realizing this is possible, and then having him on stage?
It was ridiculous. I had to work really hard to not hug him all the time. He said some very nice things about me, and it was very special. And then I did another.
What was the goal of these podcasts then? Why set up these podcasts?
The podcasts, I just wanted to push it into as many mediums as I could. Simple as that, really. Just, throw it out into the internet and see who likes it,
But when I've watched, and I have saw some of them, when I watched some of the podcasts, it had a feeling of you were trying to discover history. You were trying to, there was an element of desire to understand in it. So it didn't just feel like you were moving into a new medium. It felt like you had a goal with it, that there was something specific you were trying to find or nourish.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, certainly there was an element of, kind of, like I say, sort of finding something and wanting to show everybody what you found that you love. It's like a kid with their favorite toy. It's like everyone must see it and everyone must understand why it's my favorite toy. But also at the same time, it was with all the current acts that I book on those shows. Your East End cabarets, your abandoned mans, all these cutting edge acts. It was. The main mission for me was to say, you think variety's a dated medium, shut up and watch this. And now say it to my face again, to show that it's, all these acts, me included, were working small basement venues. And most people didn't know that there was a variety scene. So if you can just try and show people, Yeah.
And variety used to be the king. Well, I suppose variety still is the king of Saturday night. Britain's Got Talent and whatnot like that. But
Britain's Got who now?
I suppose that isn't.
I'm not familiar.
Yeah. But it's got a different vibe to it maybe than the variety scene that you're talking about. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, I mean the as somebody who has been on, I haven't been on Britain's Got Talent, but I've been on America's Got Talent, and it's not about the talent, it's about the format. It's about, the stars of that show. Like, who won America's Got Talent 3 years ago? Nobody knows. The person that won it doesn't know. They've forgotten. It's about the people behind the desk and the host, Is it a decent way to get some more eyeballs on your social media feeds if you're a performer? It can be, but it is also can be a fast track to being humiliated and having your career stamped on. So
do you think it's better for the industry that exists, or do you think it's worse for the industry that exists and worse for the art form as well as the industry?
That's a good question. I think it's worse that it exists. I think humanity, and I've been on America's Got Talent. I would not poo-poo going on one of those shows, not in this country, but again, it has its use from a cynical point of view, especially in a time of pandemic when, but I think generally
this is outside of the personal, isn't it? We're talking about the art form, the industry as a whole.
I think
rather than your own personal foothold.
I think generally anything that attempts to reduce artistry to competition is bad. Because it's not a competition. That's the beautiful thing about Covent Garden. That brings us back to Under the Portico. Everyone's act is different. No one's in competition with each other. We've all got our time out there, and we can all help each other, and we can all love each other and collaborate and encourage each other. Yeah. There's no reason why we can't do that. To pretend, as these shows do, that all performers are at each other's throats and everyone wants to be number one, it's rubbish. It's a shame, is what it is. Because my feeling is, wouldn't it be better television? And it probably wouldn't, but wouldn't it be nice to show the collaborative, encouraging family of performers that we really are in real life?
Well, this is one of the things that I don't think media has ever managed to do, is to encapsulate the real street culture, the idea of community, the tutelage, all the different elements that go into street culture are always lost. They never get conveyed in the medium of television or film, as far as I've seen so far.
No, yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's it's funny, when I was working at Covent Garden, every few months it seemed like there would be some film student would come down and would ask, "Oh, I'm going to make a documentary about street performing. I'm going to capture what's great about it." And we're like, "Okay, yeah," and they never would. It's I guess it would take a street performer to do it.
But I think there's also as well, the thing with that is that street performance doesn't look good on camera. I've got this belief now after watching years of street shows, people I love, and I love watching them on film because I can imagine what they're doing through a theoretical, mechanical kind of process. But does it look good? Does it look engaging? Would somebody who isn't necessarily looking that way enjoy it? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
You
No, you're
can't capture that
absolutely right.
vibe.
Yeah. It looks a street show on film is as useful as watching how a TV show gets made. It's what if you ever watch, if you go and see a TV taping, it's super boring and nothing ever happens and it doesn't make as much sense, and then you see it edited back and you go, oh, okay, that's what they were trying to do. That is made for screen. What we do is made for live. It's made to touch people, to have a living immediate dialogue with people.
Yeah. And so you started doing blogs and things like that as well. You're a blogger. Am I correct in thinking this?
I blog. I dabble.
And so why did you start doing a blog then? What did that hold for you?
I've always liked writing. I've always secretly wanted to be a writer. It was, again, that first solo show that I did, I wrote it. It had big chunks of text that I wrote and it seemed to work. And I liked the idea of learning the skill of writing by, as circus performers, we know the value of practice. So yeah, a few, I guess maybe 10 years ago now, I started blogging and started writing and tried to commit to it fairly regularly, and I think slowly got better at writing. I got picked up by a website, by Chortle, for a couple of years. I wrote a column for them, and then they did something that made me unhappy.
How did that work? Did they give you an email and say, we like you, we'll take you?
Yeah, there was some discussion with my agent about, would you like to pursue writing? And I was like, yeah, if anyone's interested. And they were like, well, maybe someone's interested. And it was all very casual. But
have you stayed with the same agent over all this time?
That was not the same agent as was the producer of my Edinburgh shows early on. That producer was the first producer was I had some issues with, but then it was a subsequent Edinburgh that I got picked up by my current agent, who I'm very happy with, and he's been my agent now for, I don't know, 8 years, 7 years, a while now, yeah. So yeah, they said you can write a monthly thing about basically, when they first said it, the first offer was, we'd like you to be our variety correspondent. And I said, what is that? What would that involve? And they were like, we don't know. Maybe review variety shows. I'm not doing that because they're all my friends. I'm not going to review my friends' work, but I will write
scathing reviews.
Yeah,
of people,
come on, that's suicide. But he basically said, yeah, you can just we like your writing, write about something every month. So that was nice. So I did that for a couple of years, and I have a blog, and so
with Chortle, so you became a writer once a month, and you say that you separated company with them.
Yeah,
I've got to delve a little bit.
It's not really worth delving, but yeah, they made some. They did a thing that left me feeling unvalued and insulted. So since they weren't paying me anything, I thought, well,
okay, so you weren't being paid to work for Chortle.
Those websites
just doing it for exposure.
I was doing it for practice. I was doing it because I knew that I would practice and get better if I had a deadline every month. That was the reason I did it.
Yeah.
It's it's like telling someone, this time next year I'll be able to do 7 balls. Now you have to practice. So yeah, and I really enjoy writing, and it's got me to the point now where I think I can say this. I am more than halfway through my first book, which is nice. It's nice to write. It's a different kind of thing to do.
And so, what do we have to look forward to from Mr. Ricardo in terms of the literary productions?
I'm not allowed.
Sci-fi? Is it?
I'm not allowed. Sci-fi. It's about a brave young juggler who travels the universe of the tablecloth.
Tablecloth of justice. The balls of universe and time.
I think that's your book. I can't. I'm not going to tell you yet, but it's I don't know what I can say. It's kind of tangentially about everything we've been talking about.
Okay, cool. Very interesting. Well, I'm sure everyone has been sufficiently salivated by the idea, so we'll look forward to, like George R.R. Martin, in 25 years, a book might be made.
Yes.
And so is that what's taken up a lot of your time now? Are you now kind of primarily a writer during the quarantine? Are you sitting there working on a book? Or
yeah, it's been... I was kind of pootling along with the book before quarantine happened. And then when quarantine happens, you've got no excuse to not get the book finished, have you? I mean, you know, what else are you doing? You're literally forced to be at home every day. There's your computer, you know. So yeah, what I do now, what my job has become since quarantine is I'm a writer and I make YouTube videos. It's weird, but you know, I've been working really hard. You know, I mentioned my mental health earlier. In situations like this, it's very easy for one's mental health to spiral, and it has and does. So I've been sort of making things has always been healthy for me as a distraction from darker thoughts and that nice little endorphin rush you get from having made something, you know. So I've been making sure that I keep writing and keep making YouTube videos so that I am exercising those muscles and not just sitting around staring at the walls.
Fair enough. Are you practicing juggling still? Are you still throwing the balls around a bit, keeping the skills going?
I really should, because at some point, one day, I'm going to do a show again, right? And
you might not be able to.
Yeah, well, exactly. I haven't done... I did a show on Zoom a couple of weeks ago, and literally in the few minutes before we went live, I realized I hadn't even touched these props for months. Do I know what I'm doing? So I really should, but no, I haven't been. I've got 5 balls. I should just, you know, be doing a couple of hundred throws a day on those, shouldn't I? That would be...
Yeah, well, something at least to keep it going.
Yeah.
And what have you felt about the Zoom thing, the thing that happened when quarantine broke out with performers trying to find a new audience?
I mean, yeah, that's my my considered opinion. Yeah, it's not the best, is it? I mean, it's all there is, really. So, you know, I know a few people have been doing sort of live stream shows and stuff. I did one on Zoom a couple of weeks ago, and the thing that made it the thing that intrigued me and made it interesting was they had on a laptop on the front of the stage, and it was actually from an empty theatre. They had the front row like live webcam streams of the first like 20 people, and you could interact with them. Oh, it was fantastic. It was it had been a long time since I'd been sarcastic to a stranger, you know, which is a major part of my act. So that was nice. But essentially, when there's no audience there and you're just kind of doing things into the void, I mean, it's not the best, is it?
It's a different medium, and I think this is what I thought when I watched it, is there was a lot of people trying to smash square pegs into round holes.
Absolutely so.
I think what people needed to do, and maybe will need to do if this continues much longer, is to try, in my opinion at least, develop work that's designed to be on camera. It's designed to be on the screen, you know, and have that aesthetic to it. Just because trying to get people to clap and cheer over a camera in a chat room is not the right tactic. Yeah, you have to realize that you're not a live performer anymore. You're a broadcaster, and that's a whole different thing. Yeah, I mean, I must say this, everybody who's watching now, please check out Matt's YouTube channel. It's very good production quality, some nice speeches, and I think you have done in your production what other people haven't, is you've understood the medium. You're producing stuff on that channel which fits the medium.
Thanks. That's no
problems. So we're reaching. We've been an hour and 40 minutes. We're reaching towards the latter quarter of the interview.
Right.
Is there more where we can go for much longer if we want to?
No.
But I think 2 hours is a nice round number. Is there more stuff you want to talk about? Is there anything particular you want to talk about in this last 20 minutes?
I'm an open book. Whatever you want to ask.
Well, what can we ask? Well, when you began YouTube, what were you thinking about on the YouTube stuff?
When I began it for like this for the pandemic, what was I thinking about? I mean, partly, don't go mad, make things. Partly, I like learning a new skill, and I've got, I used to be a photographer, so I've got the eye. So I thought, well, I think I can probably learn this. I can learn how to make it look nice and all that stuff. Yeah. And I like, again, researching things, finding out about stuff. Weeks and weeks of YouTube tutorials and advice and all that stuff. Love all that. Fill my brain with information. But also, of course, I'm a working live performer. I paid the mortgage on this place by doing live gigs. I ain't got no live gigs, so I need to see if I can make any revenue at all. Which the YouTube videos bring in a very modest amount of revenue.
Nominal,
but these little videos have bought me groceries. And also I don't want to vanish out of people's minds when this is over and I need to hustle for work again. I want people to remember me. Yeah. So if I'm popping up on people's screens with something that is good, of quality, then that, when all this is over, if it ever is, then they'll still know who I am. It's the perennial fear of the performer is don't forget who I am.
Yeah. And do you have a set trajectory out of this situation? Have you got something planned? Have you got a way of dealing with post COVID and post Brexit Britain?
Oh, geez, Brexit's a whole different thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I haven't. It's tough right now. This year, pretty much no live work. By now this year, I would have been to Australia, New Zealand, Canada twice, France, Germany, Belgium. It's in terms of Brexit, as you just heard, a lot of my work is in Europe. I try to not think about it too much because I can't affect it, and I try to not dwell too hard on things that I have no influence over. I also, there's one thing people like us are good at, street performers, solo, small scale creatives, is that we're resilient and we're fucking sneaky, So after Brexit hits, finally, if anyone's going to find the loopholes, it's going to be us, right? If anyone's going to find the way to make it work, it's us. So my whole strategy is just hoping for the best.
Yeah, see what happens and respond to it as it happens. Which I suppose, as you said, very straight performer thing, dealing with the chaos as it comes to you.
It's the thing about Brexit is no one knows how it's going to play out. So if you don't know, there's no point worrying about it yet, is there? It sucks. It's stupid, and this country is an idiot. But what are you going to do?
Yeah. And I suppose the other thing to say is, do you have any advice for people who are beginning, who are starting the journey in both variety and in the street?
Don't take my gigs. Find the thing that means something to you. For me, once I started doing the gentleman juggler thing, I started wearing suits. I started realizing, I really like suits. I really like all the culture of pocket squares and ties and the history of this. And again, research. And I like being that person now. I mean, I've talked in therapy about how Mat Ricardo is not my real name, but it is the name that is the label for the man I have become. And And
do you have performer's disease then?
What's that?
Well, performer's disease is something I've always captioned
Chlamydia.
as when the character. Well, it's gonorrhea and syphilis and whatnot, but it's not a performer's disease and a disease performers regularly have, but it's a disease which is specific to performers, where the character consumes the old identity and becomes the new identity.
I mean, I guess, but with me that was deliberate. I like I kept saying before, when I was young, I was very shy and I was very introverted. I am not that now. And picking a name and picking a way of dressing and finding a new family was all a very, very conscious journey to create the man that the teenage me dreamt of being. And that's really, that's and it's a continuing process. I think that's true of all of us. With me, it is definitely a conscious thing. And
so it's not so much disease, but it's a natural progression of your character in your context.
For me it wasn't the disease, it was the cure. It was the therapy.
I mean, because we all know the performers, don't we, where you struggle to have a chat with them sometimes. You think you're lost in this thing. I've had that myself sometimes, but you've managed to maintain balance as you've done this.
I hope so. What's most important to me at the point in my life I am now is I enjoy spending time with people who understand me, and who I understand, and I'm not one of those people that is, when I'm off stage, is all trying to crack jokes and trying to be the center of attention, and I'm happy to just float and around, and
And do you have a thing in terms of interacting? When you work in a cabaret circuit, I know that a lot of working the cabaret circuit is about networking and stuff. Do you have a way to engage with that? Are you someone who is consciously networking and doing these things, or are you somebody who just ignores that side of it and just hopes the work works for itself?
And that's probably to my disservice, but I don't know how to do all that stuff. It all seems a bit cynical, and I'm not sure I would know how to do it, or if I did, I'm not sure I'd be any good at it, but I try.
It's definitely something I've always struggled with myself. I can't just, you get this feeling of insincerity and then it consumes you, and you just can't really do nothing.
You just assume people know what you're doing. I've seen people do it and it's like, everyone knows what you're doing. I mean, it sounds really, really dumb and simple, but just try and make your work as good as it can possibly be. Pour your soul and your heart into your work, and if you're good, then the right people will recognize you.
There you go. And I think that's quite a nice moment to tie everything up. Everybody who's watching, guys, thank you for watching. I'm going to ask this, my whiners, people who watched so far, people who are watching the history, we are going to move on to YouTube very soon. So please, can you go over to the YouTube channel, subscribe there. The videos at some point will be posted there. For now, I'd like to say thank you everyone for watching. Matt, thank you for your time. Thank you for the story. It's been an absolute pleasure to sit and listen to you.
Any last
words for everybody?
No, thank you. Any of you that had an interest in listening to me witter on, thank you very much. This was very nice.
Cool. So thank you, everyone. From me.